Faithfulness in a forgetful world. This is taken from 1 Samuel chapter 18 to chapter 23 and 2 Samuel chapter 9. What happens to our promises when the people we made them to are no longer around to remind us? Most promises are easy to make when emotions are high, when friendships are strong, and when the future seems bright. But what about decades later? What about when keeping that promise cost us something? What about when the person who could hold us accountable is dead? Many people remember injuries longer than they remember promises. Many people repay kindness with forgetfulness. Many people use power to settle old scores rather than honor old commitments. Yet one of the most remarkable stories in Scripture is not a battlefield victory, a giant slain, or a kingdom established. It is about a king who remembered a promise. Jesus' teaching in Matthew chapter 5, verse 33 to 37 forbids us making oaths. The core of Jesus' teaching here means that our words should be so honest and solid that a simple yes or no should be enough. It's calling for speech that is clean, direct, and free from the need to convince others, impress, or manipulate. When we add extra layers, swearing, exaggerating, or overpromising, it signals a drift away from truthfulness and towards the kind of destruction that aligns with the evil one. At its core, the statement urges a life where integrity is so natural that our plain words can always be trusted. This is exemplified in the covenant between David and Jonathan, which stands as one of Scripture's richest portrayals of friendship, shaped by God, strengthened by loyalty, and sealed with sacrificial love. It reveals a bond marked by faithfulness, courage, and grace, a relationship that endured hardship, honored God's purposes, and extended kindness beyond their own lifetimes. In their story, we see not only the beauty of godly friendship, but also a model for the relationships God calls his people to cultivate today. Friends rooted in commitment rather than convenience, shaped by self-giving rather than self-interest, and sustained by covenant rather than circumstance. Years later, his beloved friend had died after Saul's house had fallen, after David had become king. David asked a question that revealed the character of his heart. Is there yet any that is left of the house of Saul, that I may show kindness for Jonathan's sake? 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1. That question teaches us something profound about God, covenant, faithfulness, and the Christian life. A friendship knit by God, 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 1. When David and Jonathan first met, the Bible tells us that Jonathan's soul was knit to David's. This language is intimate and intentional. It describes a bond not formed by shared hobbies or convenience, but by divine orchestration. Jonathan recognized God's work in David's life, and in a deliberate act of devotion, he placed his robe, armor, sword, bow, and belt into David's hands. offering not just gift, but himself, his loyalty, and his rightful symbol of honor. These were not casual gifts. They were symbols of identity, authority, and royal privilege. In giving them away to David, Jonathan demonstrated humility before God's plan and a willingness to honor the calling God had placed on David's life. This moment teaches us that godly friendship is rooted in selfless love. It is not threatened by another's success or calling. Instead, it celebrates what God is doing in the other person's life. True friendship is not competitive. It is covenantal. A covenant of protection and loyalty. 1 Samuel chapter 20. David and Jonathan renewed their covenant. Jonathan promised to warn David of any danger from his father, King Saul. And David promised kindness to Jonathan's family in the future. As Saul's hostility towards David intensified, Jonathan found himself caught between loyalty to his father and loyalty to his friend David. Yet Jonathan rose and chose righteousness over convenience. He risked his own safety and position to protect David, promising to warn him of any danger. David, in turn, pledged to show kindness to Jonathan's family in the years to come. Their covenant was not a one-time declaration, but a commitment renewed and reaffirmed. They understood that loyalty must be maintained, not assumed. Their relationship shows us that true friends do not retreat when life becomes complicated. They draw closer. They stand with one another in truth, even when it cost them something. A covenant that looked beyond their lifetime. 1 Samuel chapter 23, verse 16 to 18. Jonathan again affirmed the covenant with David, recognizing that David would one day become king of Israel and expressing his loyalty to him. In one of the most fondly scenes in their story, Jonathan sought David out while he was hiding in the wilderness. Scripture says Jonathan strengthened his hand in God. He reminded David of God's promise and encouraged him to remain faithful to his calling. Jonathan even acknowledged that David would one day be king and pledged his loyalty to him. This is the heart of spiritual friendship, pointing one another back to God when fear, discouragement, or uncertainty threaten to overwhelm us. Jonathan's encouragement was not rooted in sentiment, but in faith. He saw God's purpose for David and aligned himself with it. Their covenant also extended beyond their own lives. Jonathan asked David to remember his family, and David agreed. Their friendship was not limited to the present moment. It was a legacy. A covenant fulfilled in grace. You find that in 2 Samuel chapter 9. By the time we reach 2 Samuel chapter 9, years have passed since David and Jonathan pledged their loyalty to each other before God. Jonathan was gone, was dead. Saul was gone, was dead. And David now rules securely. By every cultural expectation, he should have forgotten Saul's family or removed them as potential threats. Yet David's heart was shaped not by politics, but by covenant. Remembering his promise to Jonathan, he asked the remarkable question, is there anyone left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? His desire was not to gain advantage, but to extend covenant love. David soon learned of Mephibosheth, Jonathan's crippled son, living in obscurity in a place called Lo-debar. Burdened by disability, shame, and the collapse of his family's dynasty, Mephibosheth had every reason to fear the king's summons. Instead of judgment, David offered mercy. He restored Saul's land, gifts. Mephibosheth could never reclaim by himself, and then welcome him to eat at the king's table, not once, but continually, as one of the king's sons. This was not sentimentality, but covenant faithfulness, kindness shown for Jonathan's sake. In this act, David mirrored the heart of God. Just as David sought out the broken and undeserving, so God seeks us in our spiritual hopelessness. Just as David restored what was lost, God restores what sin has taken from us. And just as Mephibosheth was welcome to the royal table, we are welcome to God's table through the merit of his Son. This is the grace of the greater covenant. Faithfulness extended to the unworthy because of another. Lessons for believers in this story. 1. Remembering covenant over convenience. David remembered what others would have forgotten, proving that true faithfulness endures beyond changing circumstances. In a world of disposable commitments, believers are called to reflect God's steadfast character. Jesus' instruction that our yes stay yes highlights how true covenant loyalty shows itself most clearly when releasing our commitment. Lesson number 2, grace that seeks before it is sought. Mephibosheth, Jonathan's son, never sought David. David sought him. This is the pattern of divine grace. Like Mephibosheth, we were helpless and far from the king. Yet God came looking for us. Christ came to seek, to save the lost, showing that the gospel begins with God's pursuit, not ours. Lesson number 3, kindness given for another's sake. David blessed Mephibosheth not because of his merit, but because of Jonathan. Likewise, God receives us because of Christ. We are accepted in the beloved, recipients of covenant kindness that flows to the unworthy for another's sake. Lesson number 4, restoration through the king's mercy. David restored what Mephibosheth could never recover. Sin steals, but God restores. Through Christ, he repairs what is broken and returns what we could never reclaim ourselves. The enemy takes, the king gives back. Lesson number 6, adoption into the king's household. Mephibosheth's place at the king's table, continually as a son, captures the heart of the gospel. God does not merely pardon us, he adopts us, bringing us into his household and calling us his children. Lesson number 6, a reflection of God's covenant-keeping love. David's loyalty mirrors the greater faithfulness of God, who never forgets his covenant. Our hope rests not on our grip on him, but on his unwavering grip on us. Seasons change, people fail, but God's promises stand firm. In summary, the covenant between David and Jonathan is more than a kind-hearted story of friendship. It is a signpost pointing us towards Christ, the truest friend of sinners. Jesus is the one who loves us with perfect loyalty, who stands with us in every danger, who keeps his promises without fail, and who extends covenant kindness across generations. Their bond invites us to lift our eyes to the greater covenant, Christ's unbreakable commitment to his people. This covenant also calls us to examine the quality of our own relationships. It challenges us to pursue friendships marked by faithfulness, sacrifice, and alignment with God's purposes. It reminds us that our promises matter, that integrity is measured not merely by what we say, but by what we keep, and that loyalty is most clearly revealed in seasons of hardship. In the covenant fulfilled by Christ, we see the pattern for our own lives: steadfast love, courageous support, and a willingness to stand with others, even when it costs us something. Finally, this covenant invites reflection. Who in your life needs the gift of covenant faithfulness? Who needs your encouragement, your protection, your loyalty, your grace? And how might your faithfulness today become a blessing long after you are gone? The story of David and Jonathan urges us to love in a way that reflects Christ himself, the friend who welcomes us to the king's table and keeps his covenant forever. Like and subscribe. See you in the next one.